Good morning, everyone, and welcome to DRT Communications Ad Monitoring Webinar. I am Gina Marie, Client Services Officer at DRT Communications Limited, and your mediator for today's webinar. First, I would like to thank everyone who is joining us through Zoom and on social media. So let's take a look on what's on the agenda for today's discussion. In today's webinar, we will be giving you insight on exactly what is ad monitoring. We will discuss why and how people all over the world are using this service. And we will be sharing with you the variety of ad monitoring reports available to you by DRT, while giving you a peek on our infamous ad monitoring portal and its many benefits. Then we'll share with you how easy it is to implement this service to your organization. Now stay tuned. Our exclusive offer available to all attendees of this webinar will be revealed at the end of this session. So let's go ahead and kickstart with a quick poll to get an idea of how many of us can actually say that we are always aware of the advertisements in our industry. Please note that we will also be monitoring comments throughout the webinar, and our guest speakers will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentations. So please send your questions via the Q&A option located at the toolbar towards the end of your screen. Our first speaker will be Danielle Terrelong, our very own boss lady and marketing and communications professional. Danielle has worked in public relations and marketing, companies like GMMB and True Juice, and Danielle has started her own communications agency in 2008. You guessed it, DRT Communications. Now, 10 years after its inception, DRT is a thriving company and the first company in the Caribbean to offer full-service media monitoring, including an ad monitoring platform. Please welcome Danielle Terrelong.
Hi, good morning. So the poll should be up on your screen, and we're looking forward to everyone responding. I think it should be to the top of your screen, because what we're really trying to find out today is exactly how much is it that we understand about the industry that we're operating in. And one of the greatest ways to do that is through media monitoring. I'm Danielle Terrelong, as we said before, and it's really a pleasure to be with everyone this morning that has logged in. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what media monitoring is. Media monitoring has two different streams. We have news monitoring and ad monitoring, and of course today's focus is on ad monitoring, and we're you know, at the end, if you want to hear more about news monitoring, we would be glad to answer any questions. So news monitoring is where we, you know, track, analyze. Our systems are actually listening and watching for content across broadcast, whether that be TV or radio, on a continuous basis, and of course in the press, social media. And our system is listening out for keywords and phrases and topics that we can identify for our clients. So for example, if we had a client who we tracked for Virgin Atlantic, anywhere in the media that Virgin Atlantic or its spokespersons or any of the keywords, maybe campaigns that they're running, and of course their competitors in the airline industry, we would be able to see every single time one of these, a news article or broadcast or a journalist or, you know, a radio announcer said, you know, to big up the Virgin crew, had a really great flight, or more of a commercial press release that was placed for them. Anywhere that Virgin Atlantic was mentioned in the media across the Caribbean, we would be able to pick it up in real time and report to our clients in either a real-time report, a daily report, or a monthly report. So that's a little bit about what news monitoring is. As we said, our focus is on advertising monitoring, and that's really looking at the industry of all our clients. We are literally right now, our system, and along with our partners, our system is looking at every advertisement that is placed right now. So as marketers on this call, if you have an ad on Zip FM here in Jamaica, or, you know, TV6 in Trinidad, our system, or Printed in the Nation in Barbados, our system is tracking. It has logged that into our system for you and of course your competitors. We're looking at industries here. So Ad monitoring analyzes the advertising space. First of all, it monitors it, then of course it analyzes it. We are able to really pick up quite quickly a couple of things that would be important for you. So if you're here, you're probably interested in making the most out of your marketing. You're interested in creating data-driven solutions. So through our ad monitoring, you have the ability to track advertising activity within your industry. You have quick and easy access to the advertising spend in your industry, the trends, the creative work that is coming out, what is published in the press, what is airing on the radio, what is on television, not just your own, but I have to emphasize the industry that you're in. So you may be asking, why would I monitor the advertising in my industry? Why would that be important? Well, I'm sure many of us have had the phone call before, you know, did you see that ad? Did you see that ad that so-and-so, you know, came out with? Did you see where, you know, that campaign launched last night? How is our campaign tracking? Did it air on TVJ or on TV6 last night? What exactly is happening in our space? Did a competitor of ours immediately counteract, you know, within a day or two? That's what really happens in the advertising space. You're also able to track your advertising spend, how much money is being spent in this space. We had a client and it was really interesting. They had no data available to them for many years, and often in marketing, especially, we're not exactly sure exactly how much our nearest competitor, or who we think our nearest competitor is actually spending on advertising. And what our system is able to do is able to tell you, you spend this amount, your competitor A spends this amount, competitor B spends this amount, this is where they spend it, etc. So this client of mine was spending $8 million on advertising, Jamaican dollars, each month because she had no content. So she always felt she had to outspend without any real data to drive that decision. Within 2 months of having our ad monitoring system, they realized that what their nearest competitor was spending 4 million Jamaican dollars. So she was outspending her nearest competitor by $4 million. Immediately, she was able to retract that type of spend and use that money and put it somewhere else. So it's super important. It also ensures that you are getting what you paid for. You're tracking your spend. And we have Joe online with us that's actually going to show us some really cool statistics about exactly how much, sorry about that, exactly how much of your advertising is actually coming, your things that you have requested to be placed, exactly how much of it is actually being aired or placed as you have requested it to be placed. And of course, all of this allows you to stay on top of what's happening in your industry and the placement. Additionally, excuse me, so that will give you an idea of how important it is to continuously be tracking your advertising and how important it is to have data to make data-driven decisions. And that's why we're here to talk a little bit about that. And just kind of give you the insight on how we do that and why that's important. Back to you, Gina.
Thank you for that insightful presentation, Daniel. Now we do have a second poll up right now. Let's see how many of us can identify with having our brand identity used without our consent. Our next speaker will be discussing this. But before we introduce our next guest speaker, let's have a quick preview of DRT's ad monitoring portal.
measure is the competitor proximity, which tells you if your competitor's ad aired in the same ad break as your brand. The sensor, for ad verification, shows yesterday's ads placement. You can click on the title of any of the ads, and voila, instant playback. And you can do the same for your competitors. Dashboard also hosts a daily trend chart displaying competitive ad spend for your industry for the past 30 days.
Okay, folks. Well, please remember that we are tracking your questions in the comments and on Twitter at DRTcom or Facebook at DRT Communication. Our next guest speaker is Joe Taylor. He is a media monitoring operations and process improvement expert. He has broad experience designing strategies and processes for capturing, filtering, and making sense of large amounts of data. Joe's company, Media Insight, is one of the leading media monitoring agencies in the world and a partner of DRT Communications. Please welcome Joe Taylor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm assuming you can hear me, and if you can't, you can. Okay, cool. Great. Do I have control of the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm sitting here in Louisville, Kentucky in the U.S., home of KFC, bourbon, and horse racing. But I spend a lot of my time in the Caribbean. I'm working with Media Insight to develop a premier, or have developed a premier advertising monitoring system. And we're so happy to be working with DRT in Jamaica to bring the product to the marketing professionals in Jamaica. So let's talk about what ad monitoring does for the marketing professional. We're all used to using a lot of different data from research. You've probably used some or all of these, either if you not directly, others within your organization. And the larger your organization, the more of these types of research vehicles you've used. So I won't go through all of those, but at the very end is the question mark ad monitoring. So you're spending money and time looking at the research results for pricing and products and consumer preference, but are you also researching the ad monitoring space? Some of you are, and some of you aren't, and those who are have realized the value of it. And what I want to talk about is three core areas of value in ad monitoring. There are others, but let's talk about the three quick areas that you can see would bring a lot of value to your organization. We're going to talk about media house compliance. We'll talk about competitor intelligence. You know, what is their media mix and what is their share of the category spend. And we'll also talk about how and whether others are using your brand names in their advertising. So Gina Marie, if you could move the slide for me because, oh, there we go. I guess there's a delay. Sorry, folks. So let's talk about compliance. Are you getting what you paid for? And what does that mean? It means if you place a schedule, say with a couple of local radio stations, what we mean by compliance is that the broadcaster delivers your ads precisely the way you ask them to. Meaning if you bought a schedule that runs during morning drive, that they actually ran your spots, your ads during morning drive, and that they aired the correct creatives. How do you know especially when you launch a new creative, did they get the word down there at Zip or at the other station? Are they still running the old ad or are they running the new ad? So compliance involves following your schedule instructions and of course your the right creative. So what we found in our research is that with newspapers, not a whole lot to worry about there, nearly 100% compliant. And it's probably because they know and you can check very easily whether your ad ran in the newspaper this morning as scheduled. Television is not quite as compliant, but we see about, on average, 90%. So that's not bad. And that's because television is a lot more structured than radio, for example. And so most of the time you'll get what you paid for. Radio is where you see a lot of variance from station to station, or from advertiser to advertiser, or campaign to campaign. And we've done a lot of research on this over the years, and our overall average for radio is about 70% compliance. We see a lot less than that sometimes. We see some stations that are nearly 100% compliant. What you as the person paying the bill for those ads needs to understand is, are you in that 70% range, which is average, or are you getting closer to 100, or are you getting less than 70? For an example, I've put up a slide here of the results of an actual study we did in Trinidad and Tobago recently. And what you have down the left-hand side is a list of media houses. The next column is the number of ads that were scheduled for this particular advertiser. We show you exactly how many of those were performed with the correct creative on the right schedule. And we give you these statistics. And what you see here is some stations did okay, and some stations did really poorly. Anything in red there obviously is not good. It's under 75% compliant. And you see the bottom line there was strict compliance was only 63% in this particular study. Strict compliance means your ads ran precisely according to schedule. Now there's also general compliance, which is, well, we didn't run your ad between 6 and 10, but we did run it between 12 and 1, so we're going to count that as you got an ad, you just didn't get it when you expected it. So what you see there, especially in this study, is you can get 100% or above on general compliance, the total number of ads ran. They're just not running at the right time, just as an example. So this kind of information is really critical, not just to you in hitting your target audience, but I'm sure your CFO really cares too. If you're paying for 100 spots and you only got 70, that's a big discrepancy in how your budget is being utilized. So Gina Marie, I've hit the down arrow and it didn't change for me, so there it goes. Okay. Here's another way to look at the information. You can verify your own spot schedule with the dash, or with the portal, the advertising portal that we're talking about here. This is a self-service approach. You could go in and you know what's supposed to happen. You have your schedule. Here you'll see a list, detections of all the spots that ran. And you would get your media houses, the actual names of the creatives, the dates that those ads ran. And so you would be able to check this yourself. You don't always have to use the auditing process, which we could talk about at some point, which is what I showed you earlier. Those were details from a very intense auditing step. But you can actually do your own checks right here with the media schedule product. So that's an overview of compliance and why it's important. You really need to know that what you've asked for is what you're getting, and which stations are good at complying and which stations need a little bit of help or a little bit of push from the client. Can we go to the next slide? So I said we'd talk about compliance, competitor intelligence, and brand use. So let's talk about competitor intelligence quickly. You know what you're spending, and you know how that relates to your return on investment. You know what your budget, how your budget for media drives the rest of your organization. How do you know what your competitors are doing with their budgets? Well, there's only one way to know really correctly, and that is to have a source of reliable data that tells you. Obviously, no individual can listen to all the radio, watch all the TV, and read all the newspapers every day. So you have to have a service that can make all of that possible. Understanding how your competitor is using their budget tells you a lot about the size of their budget, the size of their business. For example, we know there's a rule of thumb for what percentage of your revenue goes to advertising. If you know how much they're spending, you get a pretty good sense of the size of that business. You know what their marketing strategy is. You could, because based on which stations they're using, which newspapers they're publishing in, which television station, which programs, this all informs who they're at least trying to reach with their message. So there are a lot of different types of competitor intelligence data. We've touched on a few, but you know, knowing the estimated spend by media type is really important. So we had an example where similar to what Danielle said earlier with one of her clients. Once the client saw the data, they saw that they were the only ones spending any substantial money in newspaper. And in their view, that meant they were spending too much for newspaper. Another marketer might go, I know who these newspaper readers are, and therefore this makes sense for me. I should be advertising the newspaper. Should I be advertising at this level, though, knowing that none of my competitors are even in the papers? So that's the kind of information you would get from competitive intelligence. You can get a quick view of, in the market, who spends the most with a ranking report. You can compare this period's spend to the previous period's spend and what kind of change there is. You can do a period over period comparison. Here's an example where we're looking at local banks, commercial banks, May of 2017 versus May of 2018. You notice that everybody spent less this year over last year. Is that a reflection of the economy? Is there something going on locally? Your local knowledge would inform that. Of course, I can't sit on the outside and know what's going on. But that's a very stark piece of information there to see the difference in the overall spend. And you can see who's changed their budgets dramatically, who's basically flat, which would be National Commercial Bank in this particular instance. And I think I have one more slide there for this one, don't I, Gina? Station mix, this is important information too. Where are my competitors running their ads? So here we're looking at radio stations for the banks during month to date, so far in June. And you can see that Sagicor and Scotia prefer 107.5, IRI. You can also see the mix of stations they're using. You can see that JN is not really in radio much this month, and when they are, it's on a single station. I'm sorry, 3 stations. So without getting into the gory details of all of this, my point is there's a lot of information available through the systems that we've provided, and you can answer a lot of questions by looking at this information. You can get a really good sense of the rest of your category, your competitors, your place within that category, and all of your competitors' places as well. I think there's a share chart coming up next. Nope? Okay. Well, that's another type of information where you could actually see a pie chart and which brands are dominating the use of the various types of media. But let's wrap up my portion of this with a discussion about brand use monitoring. If you have a consumer brand and you do sponsorships or coordinated advertising with others, or your products are being used as giveaways or running specials, that means that other advertisers are using your brand names in their advertising. And You can know anecdotally that that's going on because you might hear it on the air or see it or read it. You know you've done promotional deals with a certain station or with a certain restaurant or bar. Of course, you know all of this, but how do you pull it all together into a unified view? And how do you uncover things you didn't know were going on, or that deals that should have expired or that haven't supposed to start yet? All of that type of information is available when you're using a system to monitor the entire ad market in your area. So this next slide is an example. Did we put that one in? Okay, here we go. So Samsung. What you're seeing here, we ran a search on the term Samsung, and down the left-hand side in the bold are all the different advertisers during the period who have run ads that have the word Samsung in them. So Quartz, that makes sense. They're advertising, you know, some special, but Magnum Tonic Wine. Okay, well, they're giving away a Samsung. So this is really useful information to keep up with how your brand is being used by others and whether it's authorized or not. So again, there's a lot of depth that's available through an ad monitoring system. We've touched on 3 areas where you should be able to get quick wins from the insights that this type of data brings to you. There are a lot of other ways to use it, and maybe in the question and answer session you might have some questions about, can you do this, can you do that? We'll be happy to answer those questions at that point. And I thank everybody for putting up with my rambling speech here today.
All right, thanks so much, Joe. All right, folks, it seems we did have some challenge with the audio for ad monitoring portal introduction video. So we're gonna go ahead and run that for you again and ensure that you're not missing out on anything.
With 24/7 access to DRT's ad monitoring portal, you'll have insight to all the advertising activity for your industry using your login details. Your landing page is your dashboard, which gives a single view of your competitive position and current activity. If you want a brief synopsis, the dashboard gives you that ideal summary. You can choose to set a date range and select from the drop-down which brand you want to display. On your left panel is your brand position versus the category leader. This shows you your brand's relative position within its category, the share of spend for your brand, and the spend gap between your brand and your competitor. Activity dissects the share of space on radio, TV, and the newspaper for the selected brand within the time frame. A really neat feature is the competitor proximity, which tells you if your competitor's ad aired in the same ad break as your brand. In the center, the ad verification shows yesterday's ad's placement. You can click on the title of any of the ads and voila, instant playback. And you can do the same for your competitors. The dashboard also hosts a daily trend chart displaying competitive ad spend for your industry for the past 30 days.
Great. So now that we've shared the different types of ad monitoring data that's available, and hopefully you would have had a better understanding of ad monitoring and how it can be used to make better and more informed marketing strategies. We're going to go ahead and open up the floor to your questions and have Daniel and Joe address all of the questions and concerns, maybe not all, but as much as we can. All right, so our first question that we're seeing is, what type of ads do you monitor?
So we have 2 parts of the system. There's the automated system, which tracks spot advertising for radio and television, and display advertising with printed publications. So just to be clear, a spot is any pre-recorded content. Display ad as opposed to a classified ad. Those are automatically monitored and logged in the system. As they said there in the demo, you've got 24/7 access to the data, and it's in near real time. We have other processes for doing monitoring of live reads, for example, craws on television, or any type of advertising that's not spot oriented. So that could be sponsorship credits, or special tags at the beginning or end of a show or a newscast or whatever. So all that information is available. It's just not necessarily automated. What we have found in our research, and why we chose to automate the spot piece of this, is because most advertising in most markets for broadcast is spot oriented. It's true that certain advertisers may spend a large chunk of their budget doing sponsorship credits or live reads or whatever, but the best way to get a good sense of the size and activity of any broadcast advertising market is to look at the spot activity. So we've focused on that, and it gives you a really good view of the market. However, any type of advertising can be monitored through the system.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. Another question that we have: how exactly can data be exported from this program, and is it printer friendly?
Okay. Well, I can answer that one. And I see a previous question that says, do you do one-off reports? And the answer to that is yes. We do have quarterly reports, monthly reports, access to the portal, which is what you just saw on the screen, that demo, as well as we can do one-off reports for you. So for example, if you wanted, a year, the past 3 months in your industry, or the past 6 months, we are able to provide that for you. Is it printer friendly? It absolutely is, because oftentimes I have to print them to make decisions here for my clients. So I know that it is. How can it be exported from this? Well, it can be exported quite easily, as well as some of the reports that we send to you are in Excel or PDF. It's up to the preference of how you want report. So access to the portal, you can export. If you go for a one-off report, we send those in easily printable, easily viewed or projected format. I see where Khalil has said, I see that you're able to also track the spend for each company. However, some companies are given discounts based on ad spend and contractual agreements. How do I know if the figure generated includes this when I request the report? Khalil, thanks so much for that question, which is awesome. And one of the questions we get all the time. The way for us to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges is to use the rack rate, or the rate card rate. We recognize that Digicel will have a different rate than Scotiabank, than so many of us, because we're all in the different categories depending on how much we advertise. So the way to compare is to use the rack rate, and it's still, because what we're really counting is quantity of advertising, where it's being done, and the differential between you and your nearest competitor. Joe, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, or if I added it all in.
I will add a couple of points. So you're right on with your explanation, but there's a little nuance I can add. Our count data, in other words, the number of times an ad runs, is absolutely rock solid. It's a real number. The spend data, as we call it, is estimated spend, and it is based on the open rate, meaning the highest rate for a particular spot on a station at a certain time of day, or in the paper. And you're right, most large advertisers are not paying those rates. So our data does not represent itself as actual spend. It is estimated spend based on open rate, and therefore is an apples to apples comparison. The nuance here is that in a transparent market, and I assume Jamaica is a transparent market, and I understand you don't have the most up-to-date audience data, but in a transparent market with pretty good audience data, the rates charged by the various stations reflect the quality and the reach of that audience. So the fact that it costs more to buy an ad in the Observer versus a smaller paper reflects the fact that there are more readers and of a certain type who are reading the Observer. So using the rate card rates not only is designed to give you an idea of the relative difference between advertising spend, it also informs the choices and the quality of the audience that advertiser is buying. So a specific example where this informs your understanding is if someone's spending $1 million on a tiny station with low rates, you know they're getting a lot of airplay for that $1 million. If they spend the same $1 million on one of the more popular stations that has a higher rate, you know that they are not getting as much. So you have to look at both the spend and the ad count to get a full picture of what's going on with your competitors.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks so much, Joe and Daniel, and thank you all for your questions as well. At the beginning of the webinar, I would have hinted at our special offer. I'm going to go ahead and share those details with you and not allow you to wait any longer. But before we go into the special offer, do we have the results for the polls that we would have asked earlier? Have you ever had someone use your brand identity without your permission? 17% of you all said yes. 33% said I don't even know. So this is something that we can discuss further as well. I'm going to invite you to continue to send your questions, and any questions that you may have even after the webinar, we'd be happy to discuss further with you.
You, Lila. I'm gonna just answer one more question before Gina closes off. We have, I think it's Ulila Brooks, who says, what industries do you service? We service all industries. We are, and just to give an example, you know, finance, beverages, and that would be alcoholic, non-alcoholic. And in finance, by the way, just as an example, we're able to break that down by category. So it could be finance with mortgages, and it could be, we could give you, you know, banking reports, and we could give you insurance, and, you know, we can really break down more deeply and give you the solutions, you know, particularly where you reside. Beverages is broken down into non-alcoholic, alcoholic, you know, waters, soft drinks, alcoholic is, you know, beer, spirits. You know, we're really able to delve very deeply because of course, all the content is available to us. So thank you very much for that question, Ulila.
If I could interject just ever so briefly to make clear that while some monitoring systems are client focused, meaning they only do the work when they have a client for that category, our system does everything. We don't start with any kind of a screen or filter. Every advertiser in every category is tracked automatically.
Yes. So that is the real answer to the question, is that it is all industries. Every single ad that places right now in Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, and Barbados, and we're continuing to grow, we are tracking it no matter what that is, and we're able to give the data. So thanks for that clarification, Joe.
Thanks again, folks. All right, so right into our special offer. DRT is offering 30 days complimentary ad monitoring service for the attendees of this webinar who subscribe to our ad monitoring service by July the 30th. That's right, 30 days complimentary ad monitoring services. So we want to thank you all for joining us today. And again, we'd like to continue to invite you to ask questions that you may have by reaching out to us via email or by telephone. You can reach out to me by email at gina-marie@drtcommunications.com or via telephone at 631-8663. We look forward to speaking with you all soon. Have a great day, folks.
Thanks, everyone.